Hello, so today we're going to be talking about indirect taxes. Now, an indirect tax is a tax placed by the government on the producer of a particular good. Now, it's called an indirect tax because the consumer, you and I, pay for that tax through the producer. And an indirect tax burden is shared by both the consumer and the producer. So let's examine the market for sugary foods. Okay, so in the UK, in Mexico, the US, and many other countries in the world, they're debating right now whether to impose a tax on sugary foods to help cure such market failures as diabetes, obesity, and many other health problems, tooth decay caused by sugary foods. Now, the way the tax works, so let's have a look at the diagram. So assume that the government pays a tax on the production of sugary goods to raise revenue and reduce the consumption of sugary foods. The supply curve will shift from S1 here to S tax. Now, we will notice some of the effects of that shift. There has been an increase in the price of sugary foods from P1 to P tax, okay? And, this is the part that most students forget, the amount of money the producers will get has now been reduced from P1 to PP, okay, with the same quantity supplied. Okay, so there's a number of effects of this that we'll have a look at now. So there's a number of pros and cons to do with taxing these types of goods. First of all, if the price mechanism is failing to meet the socially optimal equilibrium, in other words, the good is being overproduced and causing social costs on the rest of society, there is a market failure. And to tackle that market failure and overconsumption of that goods, the government needs to step in and reduce the consumption. Now, you can see these taxes in all kinds of forms. There's taxes on alcohol and cigarettes and many others. So there's a lot of good things and bad things about this. If you introduce the tax and it reduces the quantity demanded, that means that eventually or hopefully the consumption of that goods should reach the socially optimal level. And with that, of course, the government is earning revenue from PP to P tax. Now that's this here, this blue line, it represents government revenue gains. With that government revenue, they can reinvest it into merit goods, or they can invest it into advertising, say against consumption of sugary goods. They can invest it in the health service and all these other types of things. So it's good for the government. However, you'll notice that for the consumer and the producer, they're losing out. Okay, so here the consumer surplus has been reduced from this triangle, from the original equilibrium, to this much smaller triangle here. So that just means that consumers are paying much more for the same product where they could be using that money elsewhere. Equally, the producer surplus has also decreased from, again, P1, to this triangle here, down to this smaller triangle from PP. That means that the producer will be producing much less, and it could perhaps lead to unemployment in that sector. Say the sugary drinks industry. There was a big issue in Scotland recently with the same topic. One of our national drinks, Iron Brew, was very worried that the additional tax on sugary drinks would lead to unemployment in that sector. There's another argument I think is very important, and that is that who pays for the tax? So we can see that the consumer is paying for the tax. But is it a regressive tax? So that means that are lower income families paying more as a percentage of their income in tax than the richer members of society. And in the case of sugary goods, this is probably going to be true, because how much sugar is in each goods? I mean, is it going to be a tax on most goods that you buy in the supermarket? Who knows? So the consumers will pay a large burden, and particularly low income groups. And with that, you can see the dead weight loss here. So that's the loss to the whole of society of this tax. And that money's just gone now. We could have been spending it on other things, but it's disappeared in the tax. And also, really key point to note is about elasticity. How elastic the product is will determine who pays for the tax. Now, if it's a very inelastic goods, then the consumer will pay most of the tax. And that makes sense if you shift the line around. You can see that the consumer tax burden will increase or decrease depending on the elasticity. And sugary goods, I think, in most places are relatively inelastic. So how effective will this tax actually be? Because if it's inelastic, then increasing the price will not decrease the quantity demanded. In fact, it may take a very large increase in tax to show a difference in the quantity demanded of that product. Okay, so there's a quick rundown of the arguments for and against an indirect tax. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.